With Trump's cabinet nearly confirmed, Canadian federal ministers have a pretty clear idea at this point of who they're going to be working with across the border. Host of CTV's Question Period, Evan Solomon, joins us to lay out how the two houses of power stack up and who the key players across the major portfolios will be. Hey, good morning, Evan.
Good morning.
All right, so given the fact that Canada-U.S. relations is a matter of foreign affairs, as we know, it makes sense to start there. So Chrystia Freeland, our newly appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs, is heading up this portfolio. Who's her American counterpart?
Well, Chrystia Freeland's more than just the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Linz. She is a minister on steroids because she came over from international trade, but she took with her the NAFTA file. So she's not just foreign affairs. Her mandate letter says her key job is relationship with the United States. So she's got foreign affairs and trade. Across from her will sit a guy named Rex Tillerson. Rex Tillerson is a former CEO of ExxonMobil. Net worth $150, $250 million. Very powerful CEO. He knows Canada very well because ExxonMobil worked really closely in the oil sands. So the good thing is, as one former diplomat, Lynn, said, you don't have to start a meeting with Rex Tillerson with a map. He knows where Canada is, and he knows especially about the energy sector. But here's a guy who also has incredibly close ties with Russia. He worked closely with Putin. He was given the Order of Russia. That's an award. By the way, other people, Canadians like Jean Chrétien, have been given that as well. But he knows Putin. He's profited from business in Russia, whereas Chrystia Freeland, fluent in Russian, she lived in Moscow, fluent in Ukrainian, and that is where they are going to really clash. She is a hardliner on Ukraine. Her family's from Ukraine. She speaks Ukrainian at home. The violence in Ukraine has gone up dramatically because of the Putin influence there. She is banned from going to Russia. So she's got to figure out how to work with Rex Tillerson on issues like NATO. Of course, Donald Trump said NATO's obsolete. Canada's prepared to put part of a battalion in Latvia to face off against the Russians. So they've got a lot of critical issues on the foreign affairs file, on the defense file, that they've got to work on. But most importantly, she's got to deliver on trade. But one last thing, that's why she appointed Andrew Leslie as her parliamentary secretary. He's the former commander of the Canadian Army in Afghanistan. And so he knows a lot of the administration because Donald Trump's appointed billionaires and generals. And so she's working with him because both of them know the corridors of power in Washington. Keep your eye on Chrystia Freeland.
All right, she's got a busy agenda, that's for sure. Okay, our Minister of Immigration and Refugees, Ahmed Hussen, will likely have his hands full as well, given the Trump administration's stance on immigration. So who will he be working with across the border?
Well, it's interesting. So again, let's just start about our new Minister of Immigration, Mr. Ahmed. He came to Canada as a 16-year-old refugee from Somalia. Now, one of the countries on the so-called 7 mostly Muslim country immigration ban. I use the word ban because Donald Trump's called it a ban, so why don't we go with the president on that? And he's across the aisle, essentially, as it were, from John Kelly. Now, these guys could not be more different. One guy's a former Somali refugee. This guy's a former general. This guy's the head of Homeland Security. Homeland Security is in charge of what? He was on the front lines of defending the immigration ban. He's on the front lines of making sure they build a wall in Mexico. So the entire Trump strategy, which is that we are linking immigration and refugees to security, that essentially immigrants and refugees are threats to American safety. That is the underlying tone thus far from the Trump administration. And on our side, we've got a guy who was a refugee from one of the banned countries. Couldn't be more different. Here's where I don't think he personally is going to have a big issue because, you know, immigration policy for each country is very domestic. But here's where it's going to be a problem. When Donald Trump meets with Justin Trudeau, you can bet, Linz, they're going to sit in a room and Donald Trump's going to, you know, do his thing, look over and say, hey, buddy, I understand that you have a plan with your minister to bring 40,000 Syrian refugees to Canada, and you're going to park them on the U.S. border. I don't like that. I've shut the door to that. That's a security problem. What are you going to do? So in U.S.-Canadian relationship, our policy on Syrian refugees is going to be a very, very big deal, and that will be where you'll see that friction with Homeland Security.
And speaking of security, let's talk about defense. This portfolio headed by our defense minister, Harjit Sajjan. He's already spoken with his counterpart, I understand, the U.S. Secretary of National Defense, James Mattis. So how do you interpret that relationship to work?
I think that's going to be the best of them all. James Mattis is known as the warrior monk. Okay, James Mattis, or Mad Dog Mattis, apparently doesn't like that name. He is a general's general. He is a Marine. He's a tough guy. He oversaw all the combat in Afghanistan, so he worked incredibly closely with the Canadians. I spoke to Canada's former Chief of the Defence Staff, Tom Lawson, on CTV's Question Period, Linz, and he said they know General Mattis well. Canada they awarded him a medal. He has a lot of respect for Canada, and so our militaries will work in close contact. Also, our Minister of Defence was a veteran of the combat and the war in Afghanistan. They didn't work together closely because General Mattis was a general and Harjit Sajjan wasn't back then, much lower rank. But they'll have warrior respect for each other. Here's where the friction will be, though. One, the NATO contribution issue. The United States wants everyone to pay its way, but for Canada to pay what NATO countries are supposed to pay, and only countries like the UK, the United States, places like Poland have done it, is 2% of their GDP. We currently, Canada, contribute less than 1%. That would mean adding another $20 billion, that's with a B, $20 billion a year to defense. It's not going to happen. So Canada's going to have to step up somewhere on NATO. That'll be key. And that's why you're seeing our own defense minister hold back on where we're deploying this troop, this UN peacekeeping troop in Africa. This is a wait and see what the Trump administration wants. But Sajjan and General Mattis will be a very critical relationship. And I will say, General Mattis has already contradicted Donald Trump on a number of things, including NATO. So the world, who's looking for a lot of stability when they're watching the boiling kettle and the rattling lid of the pot, which is Donald Trump's Twitter feed, when you're looking for calm, you look for General Mattis.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Evan.
There it is. There's your Super Bowl of politics.
I know.
Linz.
I love it. It's going to be fascinating to see how this all plays out. Evan Sullivan, host of CTV's Question Period. Thanks so much. You can catch Question Period every Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific on CTV.